Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! So a little bit of backstory. My younger sister, by 10 plus years, used to have bad social anxiety when she was little. But my parents got her into therapy and she got significantly better throughout the years. Now she's 100% functioning. She's very talkative and funny when dealing with family or friends, and just a bit shy when dealing with strangers. Basically, the only occasions when her old anxiety kicks in is when she's supposed to speak in public or when strangers get confrontational with her. Which is, as you probably understand, what's important to the story. Anyways, enough about my sister. So about 2 years ago, she was 18 at the time. I got back home after being out of the country for several months and decided to take my sister shopping because she had a birthday just a few weeks earlier. She's a very talented artist, and back then, she was at a stage when she was convinced that artists are supposed to dress classy, which meant that when I picked her up, she was dressed in gray trousers, white shirt, and a vest. Kind of like this to give you some perspective. My point is she looked very official. Anyway, we went shopping. She wanted mainly some painting supplies, and on our way home, I decided to stop in a big hardware store because I needed some stuff for a hiking trip with my friends. She went inside with me and wandered off to look at some other stuff while I did my shopping. I was done maybe in 10 minutes, and as I was pushing my cart towards registers and looking around to see whether I'll see my sister, I heard some guy screaming at someone, presumably an employee, about how incompetent they were and that he's getting them fired and so on. Just some general stuff you see here mentioned all the time. I don't exactly remember it to the last word. The guy sounded very angry and used a lot of profanities. I didn't pay much attention. Normally, I'm the kind of person who would probably stand up for that poor employee, but then I was really tired and didn't feel like dealing with it. However, as I was crossing the aisle where this incident was taking place, I realized to my horror that it's not an employee getting screamed at, it is my sister. This guy, who looked like someone dressed in extra for Mad Max into a business suit, he looked really comical, was holding her by her hand, shouting profanities right in her face. She looked absolutely terrified and on the verge of tears. I immediately went into a protective brother mode, sprinted across those 10 meters and shoved the guy away from my sister while screaming at him to leave her alone. He let go of her and looked dumbfounded at first. Then he got aggressive, started going off about who I think I am and other nonsense. Then he started shoving me back, but I was much heavier and taller, so I just wrestled him to the ground, where he just kept screaming incomprehensibly. By this point, the commotion had already attracted the attention of an employee who promptly called a manager and a security guard. I told him what happened and the guy calmed down a bit. So I let him go and he started ranting about how he's going to sue us all, but didn't try to get physical again. The manager called the police, who took statements from all of us, even my sister, who was finally able to speak normally, and reviewed the footage from cameras. Apparently what happened before I got involved was this. My sister was checking out some electronics and noticed some headphones or something had fallen out of the shelf. She starts putting it back, the guy sees her, and since she's dressed in official-looking clothes, he thinks she's an employee or manager and stands beside her waiting until he gets her attention. My sister plucks him out at first because she doesn't realize he wants something from her. After a while, the guy gets visibly annoyed, grabs her by her shoulder, and flips out on her about how unprofessional she is and so on. My sister, being as shy as she is shocked and stutters over herself, unable to explain that she doesn't work there. Apparently, this just makes him more mad. He gets progressively more aggressive and actually, slaps her. Luckily, not too hard. It was more like the kind of slap you give someone when you want to wake them up. A few seconds later, I appear and, you know the rest. So what happened next? Well, cops caught that psycho, much to his surprise. I remember he actually said, "What the heck are you doing? Why aren't you arresting him? He attacked me." He just wasn't able to comprehend that grabbing my sister's arm and slapping her wasn't okay. He was later charged with assault and I believe he got probation, a couple 100 hours of public service, and had to attend anger management therapy. We didn't really care. Store manager apologized even though We didn't blame the store in any way and gave us some vouchers. My sister was a bit shaken, but she was physically okay aside from a small bruise from how he held her hand. The end. This happened a few years ago, but after working over 10 years in retail, starting while I was 16 to save for college and amenities, I've run into many Karens. But this one particular lady still gives me flashbacks. This is a long one, but I promise just the absolute entitlement to this woman is worth it. I was 23 at the time, I had been working at 7-Eleven. My co-worker, we shall call her Liz, was working with me. This particular day was July 11th. If you've ever gone to or worked for 7-Eleven on that day, you know that July 7th is our promotional day. Some predetermined amount of child-sized Slurpees are given away for free. It would depend on the amount of guests. Some years it was universal across the board. Usually 100 to 200-ish free child-sized Slurpees. These were often all claimed by 12 p.m. at our location. It was now roughly 7 p.m. We hadn't had anyone come in for a few hours asking about the promotion, but it was busy with regular customers as it was hot and gas was cheap. Our location had an attached gas bar. A lady about 40 came in with a Chihuahua Russell mixed dog. At first I ignored it until she set the dog down and it began to charge other customers, trying to bite, and was growling and barking. Truthfully, I almost always ignored patrons with small dogs they could carry. They were generally always well behaved and there wasn't a spot to tie them up outside. So if I didn't hear the dog, I didn't mention the dog. But this lady had no control of her animal and the situation was fast becoming a liability. At which point, while keeping a distance, I told her she can't have the dog in the store as its behavior was a liability for both of us. She began to proclaim she knew her rights and the law and the dog was allowed. I asked her if the dog was a service animal or an emotional support animal. No, but it's my dog. I can have my dog in here. She was getting visibly annoyed and after some back and forth, she walked her dog to the front door and threw it out the door on the pavement near a man she must have been accompanied with. And when I say threw, I mean threw. This dog was thrown 5 feet to the pavement and pounced off, before walking off to the side of the man waiting outside. That there let me know that this woman was going to be a handful. After she had hurled her dog to the pavement, she came back into the store and selected a few items. 2 Coca-Cola cans, some candies, and, well, she wanted hot food. I want a free Slurpee, she loudly said, looking around at other patrons as if to elect attention to herself. I calmly expressed it was promotional and we ran out of the promotional cups and began to ring her items through. I couldn't give her a free one if I wanted to, as regular cups were counted as inventory. However, this was a complete undoing. I heard her call me a witch under her breath, and for the most part, I ignored it. Over and over, she squealed about a free Slurpee, how I was ripping her off, and so on and so on. I was about to get her hot food when she reached over the counter and went, "You must be proud of yourself, kicking out a dog. Look at your face, your mother probably never wanted you. You should have been aborted. You're a screw-up. That's why you work here, you miserable dumb jerk." At this point she was loud and 10 plus other customers were shaking their heads. I suspended the transaction and told her to leave. I was just beyond fed up. "You have to serve me," she shrieked. "No, I don't. You're being hostile and I won't be abused. Please go or I will call the police. You're unwelcome here." I turned my back, set her items behind the register and hoped she'd just go if I ignored her. "It is my right. Give me my stuff," she repeated over and over again. She continued to hurl insults at me. Then she began to insult other customers. She was becoming so hostile that I had already called the police. She was approaching customers trying to explain herself, and when they ignored her, she was cursing them as she did me. I told her over and over to go. She can't abuse my paying customers, and she was unwelcome. Each request to leave was met with obscene insults and cussing. One man had enough and forced her out of the store just walking into her. She finally left the store, and I thought, finally, what an entitled idiot. About a minute goes by, my co-worker and I are trying to ring through more people. She comes back into the store, and I finally had enough of this. As soon as she opens the door, I yell, "No! Get out! You're not allowed in here! You need to go!" She comes up charging to the counter, knocking over displays and is yelling absolute nonsense. Mostly cussing, telling me it's a public space, she can be here. And this went on for another 5 minutes. My coworker Liz, a French native, tells her to go. She is normally shy and quiet, the type who avoids any confrontation. I was shocked she even spoke up. She mistakes Liz as Middle Eastern, mocks an accent, and begins to tell her to go back to her own country, telling her no one wants to be blown up, calls her fat while throwing more merchandise to the ground. Liz laughs in her face and simply just says she's being obnoxious and racist and she needs to go. She asks for my name and I give it to her. I give her our corporate number, tell her this entire thing was on camera and she can call all she wants. My patience has hit rock bottom and every other word from my mouth is, "Lady, you need to leave." The man from before, finally annoyed, yells at this lady, tells her to go or he will make her go. This is finally what makes this lady leave. She speeds through the parking lot, laying on a horn and goes. Freaking finally. I call my boss because I know Karen is going to complain and I tell her what happened. I thought this was the end of this. A day later I am called in and, well, here we go. Complaint from Karen. The complaint stated I threatened to beat her up over her service dog. She's a frail old lady and I came out of the store and threatened to key her car. I swore at her, embarrassed her, threw merchandise at her, and I should be fired or she will seek further legal action. This complaint was so far from the truth I was actually laughing in front of my bosses, who were stone-faced believing this woman and thinking they were about to be sued. Of course, given the circumstances of the allegations, this went to legal and other managers above us. Finally, a few days later, after reviewing footage and even customers who called in to talk to my manager about being verbally abused by this lady themselves, they finally tell this lady that she's unwelcome here and she will have a no trespass order placed. I was within my rights as an employee and they told her your complaint was bogus. We checked the cameras. My district manager even apologized to me. I thought, wow, what a disaster. But I'm glad I prevailed. That has to be the end. Nah, of course not. For over 2.5 months after, Karen had her friends come into the store with dogs, all to elicit a reaction. They come in and say, "I saw the sign, but can I have him in here?" Of course, they weren't allowed. They know this, and Karen was waiting outside for a reaction. When I informed my boss of this, she checked the cameras and confirmed it was Karen from earlier trying to provoke me, and had her criminally charged with trespassing. That was finally the end of the entire ordeal. So yeah, be careful when trying to make sure your customers don't get bit by Karen's chihuahua. She will try to have you fired. This happened yesterday. I was in my local Walmart, one of the natural habits for wild Karens, because it was in the low 40s outside and rainy. So I have on a goodie with a hooded raincoat on over it, a dark gray t-shirt, blue jeans, and Doc Marten boots. In other words, I look nothing like a Walmart employee. Anyways, I'm in the soda aisle trying to reach the back of the bottom shelf to get a 24-pack of caffeine goodness, when I feel something hit my foot. I look up to see a tall, slender woman about my age, early 40s, looking daggers at me. She's not wearing a mask, her choice, but my first thought seeing this was, oh, please tell me she isn't here to try and convince me to take off mine. Side note, my Walmart has basically given up on the fight to make people wear masks, so it isn't uncommon to see customers without them. I myself am asthmatic and don't wish to risk it, but also believe in personal choice, so have never said anything about it. Sadly, this has not stopped anti-maskers from trying to convert me. Now back to my story. Thankfully, she wasn't there about getting to take off my mask. They normally just start ranting without even a hello. And she hadn't said anything, so guessing she wanted to get to where I was, I said, "One moment please," grabbed my case of Mountain Dew and stood up with it in hand to put in my cart which was next to me. As I'm setting the soda down, I hear the call of the wild Karen. A throat clear. I sigh because the lady was honestly very attractive, at least on the outside, aside from the resting bored face. Well, guessing what was coming and an idea popping into my mind, I turned to her and said, "Yes?" The wild Karen sighs and looks at a teenage boy standing by their cart, his head focused on his phone. To the teenage boy she says, "Well, at least this one is quick to respond." So apparently I wasn't the only person to get the joy of her company today. As the kid took a glance at me in what I'm guessing was a token response to the woman, whom I was assuming was his mother, I caught his eye and said, "Hey kid, do you like credit?" He pauses, probably actually focusing on what is happening for the first time, and this look of, "Oh my god," crosses his face. He takes a hard look at me, clearly realizing I don't work there, and turns to the woman. "Mom, he doesn't work here, and you don't want to push this." She looks at him confused and then turns back to me, apparently really looking at what I'm wearing for the first time, and then looks at my card. "Well, why are you wearing a mask if you don't work here?" Thankfully, the kid saved me from answering by saying, "Mom, remember, technically we should be wearing them too. Walmart just isn't enforcing it anymore." "Well, yes, I know that." Now she seemed mad at her son, probably thinking he was making fun of her. To be fair, he had said it in what might have been taken as a condescending tone, but in reality, it's just a natural teenager default. Deciding to step in and end the show quickly, I said, "I believe your son is implying, rightfully so, that just as you chose to not wear masks, there will also be people who chose to wear them, such as myself." At this, it seems the last piece has fallen into place for our wild Karen. This, however, did not stop her from asking me, "Well, do you know why the XYZ item is out on a shelf?" I almost laughed at this, because her son actually face-palmed himself when she said it. Still, he didn't seem surprised. To this, I finally said those magic words the wild Karen inspires in so many, "I don't know ma'am, after all, I don't work here." Apparently this was more than her son could handle as he just bent over his cart, howling with laughter. As she turned to him, I decided now was the time to leave the aisle, grab my cart and lift before anything else could happen. I didn't see either of them again while in the store, but I was only there for a few things, so I wasn't in the store much longer. I have spent the time since hoping the kid didn't get into much trouble, and wondering if he explained about Reddit and this subreddit to his mother later. The idea that this wild Karen might be reading stories of her own kind is both funny and heartwarming to me. For some context, I'm a police officer, and in my country, our officers don't really have the same kit that you see in the TV shows. Think a light stab-proof vest, a pistol, and some have tasers kind of thing. I'm part of a specialty unit that is basically a quick response team for situations that could turn deadly or just need specialty officers. We have the same kit as a stereotypical American officer. Bulletproof vest, AR, lethal weapons, and that sort of stuff. It does vary from officer to officer, so it is safe to assume that I stand out quite a bit. My country also has very strict gun laws, so it's not common to see people walking down the street with a concealed carry or anything like that. And from here on out, I'm going to use American terminology just to make it easier for everyone to understand. Now on to the story. Myself and a few other officers were dispatched to a call involving a male having a PTSD episode that was threatening to shoot at anyone that came near his house. We ended up staying there for a good few hours trying to help the man calm down and get him the help he needed, which thankfully we managed to do and no one was harmed. So obviously after I went to that call, I decided to stop at the shops and get something to have as a quick meal to get some energy and calories in mine. As I was going down the aisles, I noticed an elderly couple struggling to pick up some 12 packs of bottled water, so I helped them load their bottles into the trolley. Perfectly harmless, right? What could go wrong? That's when a wild Karen appears. "Excuse me?" Me thinking she has a question about something involving policing. "Yes, ma'am." "I need you to carry these to my car." She was pointing to the packs of water. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but as you can clearly see, I'm a police officer. I can't be carrying things around for you because I need to be ready to drop everything in a moment's notice, and I'm more than happy to help you load them into your cart and help you find an employee. But unfortunately, at the moment, that's the best I can do for you." She scoffs. "You aren't a police officer. You're just some wannabe airsofter." I just want a reference here. I'm in full kit just without my rifle, and it's very illegal to even just have the plate carrier. Never mind the authentic police badges. No, I very much am a real police officer. I'm part of a specialty unit. That's why I don't wear the uniform you normally see officers wear. If you wish, I can provide you with my ID and number. It's illegal to pretend to be a cop. I am calling the police and you're gonna get arrested. She proceeds to call the non-emergency number and tells the dispatcher about me. Karen, you're completely in your right to report me and verify that I'm actually one. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue shopping. A call for a police impersonator that is armed with a gun comes over the radio, and I tell dispatch it's me, but still send regular patrol officers over. You aren't going anywhere, jerk. Proceeds to kick the back of my knee, making my leg buckle and me fall over. That's it, Karen. You are under arrest for the assault of a law enforcement officer. Karen proceeds to kick and scream and all that, whilst I handcuff her and take her out of the store, and a few store employees are following, trying to stop a crowd from forming. Just as I pulled Karen out of the store to remove her from the public, two patrol cars pull up. One was a supervisor. They asked me why she's in cuffs, so I explained the story, and the supervisor questioned Karen about what happened. She ended up saying I cussed her out and attacked her, so she kicked my knee to get away from me. The supervisor obviously very quickly took my sidearm and other weapons and put me into the back of his car. Standard procedure just to cover the department, and took Karen out of her cuffs. The supervisor apologized profusely and asked if she wanted to press charges, so she obviously very happily replied with a yes. So the supervisor, Karen, she was very hesitant and insisted that she must get going and they can just email her. The store manager and another officer all went into the security room to watch the CCTV footage. The footage showed us talking, her pulling the phone out, me walking away, and then her kicking my leg. Karen was instantly handcuffed and taken back to the station to do all the booking and that fun stuff. Here, most of what I know is from talking to other officers is I was immediately placed on unpaid suspension because I was being investigated for assault. It turns out Karen had a warrant for theft, and once the officers found out she kicked him a few times, I was eventually placed in a cell. On the day of the court hearing, she was found guilty of assaulting 3 law enforcement officers, making a false police report and wasting police resources. Her theft charges were dropped as a plea deal. She got sentenced to 1 year jail time and was forced to take anger management classes. Once I was cleared of any wrongdoing, I sued her for lost wages, about 6 months of suspension, and defamation of character because she ended up getting my face published on basically every bit of local news during the whole investigation. And I was labeled a power-hungry abusive police officer. That ain't a fun reputation to have. So in the end of it, because Karen was too lazy to load a 12-pack of water into her own car, she got sent to jail for a year, lost her job, lost her boyfriend, basically only has visitation rights for her children. Father used the assault case to get custody of them and lost a good chunk of change. Edit. I was placed on leave for so long because I wasn't always viewable by the CCTV. There was fear of political retaliation, fear of riots like what happened in America, and because I needed to prove that the department could trust me to be back on a unit. Edit 2. I do have a union and they were amazing. The only thing they couldn't help with was a pay, as a suspension was technically a punishment and investigation for not following procedures and not calming Karen down. I have been keeping to myself since I was 17 years old. This story is around 6 years old and I haven't told anyone else about it ever. It's going to be a long one. This is a story where I got my neighbor's bully of a daughter arrested, outcasted by her parents, and the majority of her friends and stripped her of her popularity. Let me give you some backstory first. I have lived in my current house for over 20 years. My neighbors have been living in their house for around 15 years. My parents were nice and they came from a Middle Eastern background. They have 3 kids, 2 girls and 1 boy. This is about their youngest daughter, who will be the neighbor daughter, who was the same age as me. She was nice to some extent at the time I knew her only as a neighbor friend. She and I never went to the same school. But that all changed when I changed school during the 5th grade to her school. Ever since then, she and her friends have tried to make my school life a living hell. They will play pranks on me, ridicule and belittle me, and then call me names on social media. Mostly Twitter, and at the time I didn't have Twitter until I was 15 or 16, and this is going to be important. By the way, I was diagnosed at 7 for ADHD and Asperger's, mild autism, so I was her mental punching bag. So years go by and we are in high school. The neighbor daughter has jumped to being in the popular group, while I am who is a weird and unpopular kind. Their attitudes towards me keep getting worse and worse. So one night, when I was around 17, I got a Facebook message from the neighbor's daughter that she's having a party and wants me to come over. And I thought it was very unusual because 1, she has never ever messaged me unless she has to. 2, she has never invited me to her parties before. So I immediately thought that this was a jib. At this point, I was getting sick of her and her friends making sneering comments about how weird and an idiot I am. So this was a perfect time to plan my revenge. So I asked my parents if I could go, even though I was underage. Drinking age is 18 here. They said it was fine because I would be next door. So I went, and the neighbor's daughter was very surprised to see me. She and her friends started to giggle. So I followed her to the basement and saw all the other popular kids from my school, along with some others. So let me tell you this, I was only there for 30 minutes because after that I had all the evidence that I needed. I see beer bong, people getting high and smoking with bongs, and a lot of underage drinking. A lot of the others were the same age as me, maybe younger, because this party is around October, and I'm pretty sure that almost everyone there just turned 17. I also noticed that neither of the parents or siblings was there, so I left. I waited an hour because I didn't want to draw any attention. I was all ready for bed, when I looked outside my bedroom window, which has a clear view of her front yard, and noticed that the party had moved to the front yard and a third of the party people were leaving, I started my plan. I went and I grabbed my phone and called the police. I told them everything that was going on as a concerned neighbor, and the officer thanked me. And just before I went to bed, I saw flashing lights. The next day at school, and the neighbor daughter was nowhere to be found, and there was a rumor going on that she and a bunch of other students were arrested last night due to illegally underage smoking and drinking. And so a week goes by and still no sign of her. Fast forward to 2 weeks after the incident. During those 2 weeks, she and her friends completely trashed me on Twitter, saying that I was a bad person and that I was stupid, still not knowing that I was the one who called the police. I finally saw her in the halls and started to chat with her. I asked what had happened because I saw police lights at her place. She told me everything that I didn't already know and then some. She told me that her parents had grounded her because she threw a party without their permission. Her dad was furious, he's more traditional than her mom, and he had forbidden her from having or going to parties, hanging out with friends and boyfriend, or even leaving the house unless it was for school or appointments. She was on total house lockdown, which took a big toll on her social standing at school. As she was telling me this, I had a hard time keeping a straight face because I'm terrible at lying and keeping secrets. She saw this and it clicked in her mind that I was the one who called the police. She was furious and threatened to tell the whole school about it. I told her to go right ahead and added that no one was going to believe her. Then she stormed away. The thing is, even though I was unpopular, I was friends with almost everyone in my grade, especially with the guys from the most popular to the least. Additionally, I'm a goody two-shoes and one of the nicest and most honest people ever. So she tried, but the people who knew me the most didn't believe her and told her to get lost. The most popular guys came up to me and asked if it was true, and I told them in the most innocent voice that I wouldn't do that and asked what proof she had. Then I proceeded to tell them what she and her friends had been saying about me on Twitter and showed them screenshots of their feed. They said, "Yeah, we didn't think you would have it in you to do it," and then proceeded to tell everyone that I didn't call the police. Because of this, she became a social outcast among everyone except her closest friends and was completely stripped of her popularity status. After this incident, she tried to get me in trouble with the principal, During a meeting with the principal, I returned the favor by telling them that she had no proof that I did it, and showed the principal her Twitter feed, which included everything she and her friends had been saying about me for the last year. The look on her face when she found out that I had Twitter and knew of her bad-mouthing was priceless. In turn, her parents completely deleted all her social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, and took her computer and phone away until university. I didn't press cyberbullying charges because she wasn't directly attacking me. She was basically attacking me behind my back, me being literal at the time. I'm pretty sure she never forgave me for doing this to her.